Good?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sure.
All right, Senator Grant Mitchell, the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I want to begin by saying that, I don't doubt the sincerity of our witnesses. I think that sincerity is all that much more underlined by virtue of the fact that they sustain their position and they sustain their work, and in the face of literally thousands upon thousands of scientists and economists who are independent, who are spread out throughout academic institutions and other institutions across the world, and who answer and overwhelm the points that have been made here with devastating consensus and with devastating frequency. So I want to say that I don't doubt your sincerity. It isn't just the IPCC, and that's a straw man that's been raised here. It is every scientist that takes the position against which these gentlemen are opposed are not just IPCC scientists. This is independent scientists, literally, all over the world. And so in a way, to believe these arguments is to believe some kind of strange conspiracy theory, that all of these independent scientists, somehow we have to question their integrity, their motivation, assume an ability to conspire across the world in a magnitude that's almost incomprehensible. Their scientific acumen has to be questioned over and over again. And I think, when I think of a conspiracy theory, one statement that was made today that really underlines that thinking in these presentations is the one that said somehow that the Harper government is clamping down on scientists to enforce elite climate change consensus. The Harper government, of all people, would enforce their scientists to support the idea that climate change is occurring and that people are creating it. Of course, they'd be the last government that would force their scientists to do that. And in fact, if you read the documents that come out of the Environment Department, somehow they squeak out. They all underline the urgency of climate change and that we're occurring. I'm left with this impression of the woman who once said, while watching her young son march in the military parade, everybody's out of step but my Johnny. And of course, everybody's out of step. The thousands upon thousands upon thousands, the 99% of scientists are out of step, except. So the difficulty, of course, in this, and I appreciate your presentation, is that point by point by point by point, there's devastating science that confronts and overwhelms what you're saying, and maybe we have to go in that and bring in other testimony to. But I think we probably don't, because I think in the end this will settle this relatively weak. I'm going to say that David Keith, that David Keith, just to get this on the record, because some of our colleagues weren't here when David Keith, who's a renowned leader in this area, is a physicist and very, very hugely well respected. He said, one last thing that made me smile in response to testimony like what we've heard here is that this idea, testimony that we do not know how much impact humans are having on CO2. He said, come on. We have multiple, completely independent, overlapping ways to measure that. We have it nailed. And claiming that it is not true, to me, is like it speaks to a problem we have in our society of a kind of fundamental lack of trust in institutions of science and rationality. It is the same kind of attitude, I'm going to underline this, that we have saying that vaccines are dangerous so we won't vaccinate our kids, or that cell phones cause cancer, or that evolution is not true. I'll close by saying that Professor Weisner said one. He said very, very clearly later in the questioning, no one disagrees with a warming trend, and went on to say, but of course, and this is the essence of your testimony, even if there is one, it's not being caused by humans. And what I will close with, and we're running out of time, so I won't ask the question, I would just close by saying, if humans aren't causing this, then you have to be, and we all have to be very, very afraid, because if we're not causing it, we can't fix it. And there is no evidence or no ultimate suggestion in any kind of science that I've ever seen, if it's happening spontaneously, it's going to stop at some level, at some manageable level that isn't going to be too hot, way, way too hot, or in your case, way, way too cold. So I'll just say, great. I'm glad we had them here. I'm glad we got the other side, and we'll deal with that as we progress with our study and writing our report.
Well, thank you, Professor Mitchell. Colleagues, is there any further, Senator Lang?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a point here. I appreciate the fact that
Senator Mitchell and I have a difference of a viewpoint on a number of these issues, but I do want to say to you gentlemen that I don't see what's being presented as a, quote, conspiracy theory, because it seems to be out of step with what the general public is being told across the world. I want to say that I really appreciate the fact that you bring scientific, what I saw was scientific background, scientific actual facts to the table to say this is what's happened in the past. And one of the areas that does bother me as a Canadian is the political spin that's put on that climate change has not occurred since, or has only occurred because of CO2 emissions. And I think the reality of it is today, not like any other time, climate change is taking place every day, not necessarily because of man. So I just wanted to say that I would like to leave this today and a challenge to you gentlemen and others that have another point of view, that you do everything you can to get out to have that public debate, because I feel that it's been muffled. I feel that governments have intentionally and indirectly have put you in a situation where, yes, some people have seen it as a conspiracy theory. And I think that there's a place for that debate, and I think it should take place, especially if we're going to be looking, as Mr. Patterson's indicated, his research has indicated that we may well be looking at a cooling period for quite some time. And if that's the case, then we really better have a look at what we're doing. Thank you.
Can we have a summary?
Reminds me of my days pleading cases in court. The closing arguments have been made by opposing counsel, and they've been duly taken into consideration by the lordship. But there are two supplementaries. Senator Rain, you have the word, and Senator Brown, and then we'll suspend.
I would just...
Unless our witnesses want to have a wrap-up.
I would defer a question I would like to hear from our witnesses.
No, but you can. You've been so quiet.
I don't have any questions. I do want to hear their
Yeah, you will. Yeah.
I'd just like one comment. Within the earth science community that we represent, our viewpoint is not terribly out of step with what we find there. If Senator Mitchell were to come out to one of these large-scale meetings which we attend, where there'll be 1,000 people presenting, our point of view is presented by large numbers of researchers out there. There are issues sometimes in the way that sometimes the publications you're able to get into. For example, Nature Geoscience presented a paper a few weeks ago projecting a 17% reduction in the ice road capacity by 2050. If you looked at the underlying data that was based on that, it was based on 5 years of data that research was based on, but somehow was able to be published in one of the premier journals in the world. Here we are coming forward now with data we'll be presenting based on 5,000 years of annually data rather than 5 years of data. So there's issues sometimes of availability of the data or being able to get out there. For example, Professor McKitrick pointed out the issues that are rampant within the IPCC, which actually does suppress the sorts of research. But if you did actually look at the overarching literature that's out there, which is very, very large, you'll find that our perspective is not terribly out of sync. It gets reported differently. I think that's the main point of view here.
Patrick, yeah.
Yeah, just 2 points. First of all, Senator Mitchell, I didn't say the Harper government suppresses their scientists. What I said was government scientists don't have as much freedom to speak their own mind as people in academia do. And I think that that's true regardless of which government is in power. The second point is...
Support your position.
I've been involved last summer I was involved in a debate at the American Statistical Association where they put a panel together to look at applications of statistical analysis on these climate issues, and the same basic questions keep coming up. The difference between what the models project and what the data show is there. It's in the data. It's understood to be in the data. Now, if you hear from someone like David Keith, who I know and is well respected in his field, rather than just taking at face value the idea that he speaks for a very large group or consensus, ask him, how do you explain these discrepancies? I mean, maybe he has an answer that hasn't occurred to other people, but the discrepancies are out there, and I think they need to be dealt with.